You're listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mattison, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello everybody, it's Ashton Kirsch, Mattison, Wickert & Layer, and thank you for joining us for our first premiere groundbreaking subrogation podcast. It's our pleasure today to have shareholder with Mattison, Wickert & Layer, Richard Schuster, one of the most preeminent product liability attorneys in the nation. And he's, there might be a little, he's very shy when it comes to his accolades, but ultimately one of the top minds when it comes to product liability litigation. And he's been taking a leading role along with myself on queuing up these Kia Hyundai theft claims. And that's really going to be what we discuss today. So when we do these podcasts, we're going to pick a topic as we go forward bi-weekly, and we're going to talk about kind of the tips, tricks, things that we're seeing on the day-to-day handling of claims to more complex concepts and contemporary issues like we have today with the Kia and Hyundai claims. Hi, Rich. How are you doing?
Good morning, Ashton. Thanks for having me. Very excited. I don't know if I can live up to that billing, but yeah, excited at least on the substance to talk about the Kia Hyundai theft. So let's get it going.
Beautiful. So Kia Hyundai claims. How did this catch your attention?
Well, I think this similar to you. For maybe 6 months, I would hear from clients that they were having these things and just sort of stories, and didn't really sink my teeth into it until a little bit later. And then there were some clients that were asking about having, a multitude of these claims, and that's what kind of piqued my interest. And then as we are researching, then there started to be the consumer class actions. And that helped us a little bit to get our footing about, okay, what are the things that the consumers are alleging, and are they including carriers? So yeah, I think with those things in conjunction with the social media stuff, that was, kind of fun to watch because it's something different for your day. That got me interested, and I think then working with you helped sort of propel us to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, in my end, it was just slow rumbling, right? Claim, client reaching out here, question there, inquiry at a conference. Then next thing you know, this really hit the main stage, and all the carriers are talking about these claims. We're getting calls left, right, center from carriers, or even, Joe Schmo out there asking what he can do with his Kia. And obviously, we're not working on those claims. But ultimately, it's been slow building, but I think this is at the forefront and probably one of the most, important or at least talked about issues if you go to any insurance or subrogation conference. I was just at a conference last week, and I can't tell you, probably 36 people came up to me asking, hey, are you guys doing anything with the Hyundai Kia claims? And that's why this topic's so relevant at this point. So I hear that this is really a widespread issue, and it came about after the viral Kia Boys video hit. Can you tell me a little bit about that video?
Yeah, well, first on the widespread nature of it, there's some conflicting information about what vehicles are affected, but safest right now, and to cast as wide a net as possible, 2011 to 2021 Kias and Hyundais. There was some information that we had earlier that the Hyundai problem didn't affect all of those years, but now it seems that it does. You can search by VIN if you look up like Kia, Hyundai theft problem. You can search to see if the actual vehicle, if you have a VIN, is impacted. But generally, when carriers are looking at their claims and trying to, piece together what they have in terms of these losses, which is a big part of it, right? It's not easy. So right now it looks like 2011 to 2021 Kia and Hyundais of basically all models. On the Kia Boys trend, that started some time ago, but it actually went viral. What was it, about the summer of 2022? Is that about right? And a lot of short videos on TikTok, which I don't have, but they make their way then to Reels on, is that Facebook?
Right.
And then YouTube has their own like rip off of TikTok, where TikTok videos are on YouTube as well. So it made it to all those platforms, and it was these young folks under 18 for sure, kids really in Milwaukee that started it, which is right where we are. So it was pretty
land of beer and cheese here.
Yeah, but it made it hit close to home, right? Because you're down there having dinner or whatever, and you hear, like, now we know there were 7,000 Kia and Hyundais stolen in Milwaukee in 2022. Like, that's kind of an insane number. So it hits close to home. But anyway, these videos went viral of these kids with the hashtag Kia Boys, and unlike prior thefts, most of the cars aren't getting stolen for money, it seems, right? They're getting stolen just to, I'd say joyride, but it's not really a joyride. It's more menacing. They're driving them like idiots. They're crashing them. They're vandalizing them.
Well, typically with thefts, it's, you're stealing the car, you're either chopping it out or you're just keeping the car somewhere. This is much more nefarious. I mean, it's just people going out there stealing the cars, driving around and crashing into a building.
Yeah, that is the end. The goal, the end of it is just to steal it. There's nothing past that for most of these kids, it seems. You might be too young, but when I was younger, there was a ton of thefts of Honda Accords and Toyota Camrys, and it was all because so many of those were sold. They could chop them up for parts, and those cars would just disappear. There wasn't really any subaru on those. Because the cars just disappeared. But these seem to be different in that it doesn't seem like these cars are getting chopped up, right? Like, these kids are stealing them, riding them around for a few days, then stealing another one. And it's that kind of thing. So I think that's why it went viral, because it's like a shocking thing. I don't think people were trying to endorse it, but they were watching these videos because they're so crazy, right? And dangerous.
Are these videos still on TikTok?
Well, TikTok says that it's it's willing to and doing its part to take them down. They are harder to find now, but you know this. It's the internet, right? Once it's on the internet, it never really truly goes away. And if you go to YouTube, I don't have TikTok, so if you go to YouTube, you can find dozens of videos about Kia thefts, Hyundai thefts, that sort of aggregate the TikTok shorter videos, and then that can teach you about stealing them. Yeah.
And I was looking into that before this podcast, and I saw on YouTube, there's videos everywhere on this. I think the problem with TikTok is TikTok uses their algorithm, and the algorithm pushes the content to you in your For You page, right? So that was happening all the time in Milwaukee and in various metropolitan cities, where it wasn't just that you could find this on TikTok. It was that this was showing up over and over and over again on people of this certain age group and demographics, showing them, hey, look how cool it is to steal a Kia, steal a Hyundai. And next thing you know, they're going out with their buddies and doing just that.
Yeah, it worked. Kids are definitely on TikTok, and the thefts spiked at a dramatic pace in mid 2022, to the point where now, as you know, one of the most recent sort of turns in this saga is that cities are suing Kia and Hyundai for like nuisance type claims, because obviously the resources on the city to deal with this are on cities is significant.
Right. I mean, it's a public nuisance claim based on increased policing, vandalism, all the other things that go along with having some rash of thefts, because the thefts have increased just dramatically after this. I mean, what kind of increases have you seen?
Well, I pulled some numbers, and if you just Google about Kia thefts, you can find all kinds of numbers that will shock you. But a few I pulled were that in Wisconsin in 2021, so in 2022 it'll be even more, but I don't have those numbers. But in 2021, 6,963 vehicle thefts. Milwaukee's not that big a city, so you think about 7,000. What's that? That's several a day, right? Right. I'm not a mathematician, but that's a lot a day. Every day.
Right.
I've never even seen a car get stolen. So to think about how small Milwaukee is and how much time we each spend there, and then that just in that city, what is that, 20 or something like that a day are getting stolen? That's crazy to me. And of the vehicle thefts in Milwaukee, something like 60 or 70% are Kia Hyundais in 2022. I'm sure the number's bigger in 2020, in 2022. Minneapolis, same thing, 900 or 850% increase in thefts. I saw that stat. The Minneapolis police chief, or whatever they call the police chief there, and their district attorney held a press conference about a month ago highlighting the problems that they're having in that community. I don't know if you saw that. But they're looking at, I don't know if they have yet, but they're looking at some type of remedy for how much of a burden it's been on the city. And in Minneapolis in 2022, 40% of all stolen vehicles were Kia or Hyundais, and almost 10 a day just in St. Paul, Minneapolis. Same thing in Chicago. The last day I pulled was a 767% increase in car thefts over year in Chicago. That's
Yeah, so we're seeing a 2 to 3x increase in thefts in general. And of those thefts, I mean, previously Hyundai, Kia, I mean, they were proportionate to the other manufacturers before kind of this trend and all of this came to light. Now they're the majority of cars stolen, right? They're not the majority of cars on the road, but they are the easy majority of cars that are being stolen in these cities.
That's right. And I would suspect that Kia Hyundais, prior to the Kia Boys viral videos, would have been disproportionately low, because usually folks want to steal cars that are very valuable or that have some other reason that they can steal them for money.
Right.
And that's not the case with these cars. No offense, they're fine cars, but they're not particularly cool. They're not particularly expensive, right? So I think I saw prior to this, one of the most commonly stolen vehicles was a Corvette. It's like, okay, it makes sense. There's enough of them out there. It's not like a Ferrari. You can see them around. It's not like a Ferrari anyone will notice if you're near it. But it's an expensive and like a performance vehicle. So I think probably pre-TikTok, the percentage of Kia Hyundai thefts was probably lower relative to other manufacturers. That's just a guess.
Agreed, fully. So now it's my understanding, going into more of the meats of this, that this is a very obvious defect. Can you tell me more about the specific nature of the defect and how these thefts are occurring?
Well, that's an interesting term, defect, right? I guess it depends on who you ask whether it's a defect. Hyundai and Kia deny that it's a defect, and they say that they meet all the mandatory U.S. Regulations with respect to cars. But I think it's a design defect, and I think most jurors would agree that it's a design defect. The problem is that the ignition lock cylinder on Kia Hyundais are held in by a small pin, and you can get underneath where your feet would hit if you raise your knees under your vehicle, underneath the steering column. You can pull that down really easily in a Kia Hyundai. It's just plastic, and you can pull it down. You use a screwdriver to pop out the ignition lock cylinder because it's just held in by a pin, which is different than some of the other vehicles. And behind that ignition lock cylinder is the ignition switch that the ignition lock cylinder marries up to. So I know that's a bit wonky, particularly in audio form, but if you put your key into a car, it turns the ignition lock cylinder. On the side opposite your key, it's physically turning something. When that side turns, it marries up to the ignition switch, and a physical shape matches the backside, and it turns over the engine, the starter, and that's how the car starts. If you don't have an immobilizer, which is the problem here. So the shape just happens to match a normal USB. That's why they're stealing these cars with a USB and a screwdriver. They need the screwdriver to pop out the ignition cylinder, and then they need the USB because it just happens to match the physical shape that you need to turn the ignition switch to start the starter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like legitimately in seeing these videos, all you need is a flathead screwdriver and a cell phone cable, right?
Yeah.
Or a USB drive, whatever it is. And then you can steal the vehicle in, 25 seconds.
Yeah, so I actually, people like my mom were asking me, like, well, what is it about the cord? It's not they're not downloading anything. They just need the physical shape of that cord. That's why they use it. You can use anything, but that USB cord seems to match up very well. So on other vehicles, they also obviously have ignition lock cylinders and ignition switches. All or most cars do, but they have immobilizers. So it's usually a chipped key, and it sends an RFID code or a radio signal to the backside. So the car won't turn over if it doesn't receive that radio signal. So it has to both physically match like the key would, and you have to have that signal. But on Kia Hyundais, most of them don't have immobilizers, and that's exactly why they're being stolen.
And this isn't a new technology, right? I mean, this is something that's very common and actually mandated in other countries. Is that right?
I would say probably mandated in most countries, at least Canada, the UK, Australia, all seem to mandate immobilizers. And as you know, in, say, 2015 even, something like 96% of vehicles had immobilizers that were sold in America, but only 25% of Kia and Hyundais did. So they made a design decision to not include that safety feature. But the interesting thing is we have some Kia Hyundai manuals and warranty information. And in those manuals, they do talk about how immobilizers reduce the risk of theft dramatically. So it's not like they didn't know.
And their initial response, as I understand, is, hey, basically get a club, secure your vehicle. And that was a big thing is, obviously there are certain things that the individual consumer can do to increase the risk of theft. But ultimately that doesn't solve the problem, right? These vehicles are being targeted. It's an easy vehicle to steal. And the solution, right, the be it chip key, use of an immobilizer, I mean, this is very common throughout the industry here in the United States and just nationwide, even in these Kia Hyundai vehicles.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into it, but there is now a purported fix by Kia Hyundai, right? You've seen that.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, that fix is an update to the software, but it's not like a Tesla where you can just do that in your garage. It just downloads when you get on a Wi-Fi signal. You have to bring it into a dealership. So as I understand it, Kia and Hyundai are rolling out which models will get the update first. And I think if they're doing it right, probably the cars that have the biggest problems, the most propensity to be stolen, they should have identified that by now, working with industry or the National Highway Traffic Safety Institute, those folks like that. And they should be rolling it out on the most prone to theft vehicles. But my understanding is that all vehicles that are impacted by sometime midsummer are going to be eligible for the software update to the vehicles that supposedly will not allow the car to start if you don't have the key fob with you. And I don't know if it works or not. I did read a story about a lady who had what looked like a pretty cool Hyundai. It looked pretty neat. And she had a club on her car. Then she got offered the update. So she went in and had the update, took the club off the car. It was kind of annoying to use every day, right? So she took that off the vehicle, and then her car got stolen. So I don't know if they stole it the way that that is the defect, with the Kia Boys trend made widespread, or if they put it on a flatbed or they stole it some other way. But there is at least one story that we know about where someone who had the update still had their vehicle stolen.
And I'm sure as time goes on, we'll see, more and more about whether that update, the efficacy of that update and what happens.
Well, hopefully it works like a charm, right? Otherwise, the problems for Kia owners and the companies that insure them, and all of us collectively are going to be, they're just going to continue. I saw something recently about there's a handful of deaths now attributed in some way to these thefts where they get joyrided or ridden or driven by 14-year-old kids who crash them. Somebody else might die. The kid might die. So pretty sad, really. And hopefully this update that Kia and Hyundai are offering will work. But they can't undo the damage that they've already caused by having what we believe is a design defect, but they can, try to fix it going forward. And it appears after some potential delay that they're working on that now.
Excellent. I mean, so obviously deaths, damage to property. There's a lot of ways that these claims can come about. We're really seeing three primary ways. One would be the most obvious. Maybe an insurer insures automobiles and one of their vehicles is stolen and damage occurs to the vehicle itself, right? Very obvious claim. What other claims are you seeing?
Yeah, just like you said, we call them partial theft or attempted theft, right? Where they break in to the vehicle, so they cause damage, but then when they get in, they realize it's a push-to-start vehicle. If it's a push-to-start vehicle, it's not susceptible to this type of theft. So then they just leave the car, or maybe they vandalize the car and then leave. A lot of these Kia Boy type folks, they're tagging the car, so they're like graffitiing the top inside of the car, which is tough to deal with. And then, in addition to that, obviously, if your car gets stolen and crashed, then there's a lot of property damage there. And then the third is the damage to other property. So maybe you live in a neighborhood where somebody tore through and they tore up your grass, took out your mailbox, so that type of stuff, crashed into your business. Those are really the three we're seeing.
And we've seen all of those, right?
Yeah, we see all of those. Yes. In fact, yeah, we've even seen where a stolen Kia crashes with like an exotic European vehicle, right? So the damages can be very serious.
Absolutely. So I understand that MWL is in the process of preparing to file a lawsuit against Kia and Hyundai. Can you give me a background on the current kind of procedural status of the suits that have currently been filed?
There are more than a handful now. Even 2 months ago, it was like a handful of consumer class actions that were filed, first in Iowa, Ohio, a couple other places. But now there's like 50 or more, and they've all kind of been funneled into an MDL that was opened in January, and that's in the Central District of California. That's where we will be filing for all of the carriers that we represent with respect to the Kia Hyundai issues.
So what are the consumers, the claimant cases about?
While I'm not as familiar with those as I am with the insurance claims that we're bringing, but by and large, there's a lot of problems that Kia owners have faced because they have these cars. One is some insurance companies now are dropping, or maybe not dropping, but they're non-renewing. They're having more trouble getting insurance on these vehicles. When they can get insurance, the insurance is much more expensive. Obviously, also if you own a Kia, then you have to worry about, is it going to be stolen, and you have to deal with all of that. And at one point, Kia was offering some type of potential solution, but the installation of it was very expensive. So maybe customers that chose that had those expenses. And then finally, that I can think of off the top of my head, is that the value of the vehicles is diminished. If you have one of these vehicles, fewer people want to buy them from you now because they might get stolen first, and they're more expensive and problematic to insure.
Yeah, the diminution value component's a huge part of that. I know that just personal experience. My little sister, her boyfriend, just got a Kia maybe 6-7 months ago, and I asked him why he bought it, and he said, "Well, they're like half the price of a normal car." I was like, "Well, tell me about that. Why is that?" And it's, well, because there's this major theft issue. We live in the city, and the price is incredibly affordable, so I took the risk. But the people that already had Kias, we're talking about a huge, risk has a cost, right? And that's one of their primary allegations, at least as I understand it.
Well, the person who sold the vehicle to your sister's friend, obviously, they probably got less than they thought they would have got on resale when they initially bought the thing. Because they wouldn't have suspected when they bought it that it wouldn't have this technology that's been around forever that makes hot wiring a car much more difficult.
Absolutely. So, suit's about to be filed. What are the allegations? Really, what are you alleging against Kia and Hyundai?
Well, there's many causes of action in the complaint. Among them are violations of the California Consumer Legal Remedies Act, violations of unfair competition law, common law fraud, A big one is the breach of implied warranty for merchantability. There's violations of Song-Beverly that we've alleged. And the last one I can think of is the Mag-Moss claims, violations of the federal Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act claim, which is like a bootstrap to state warranty law, but it entitles plaintiffs to attorney's fees, and has some other things that make it an attractive option when you're in this type of situation. But those are the causes of action. The allegations are generally that, look, Kia, Hyundai, this is a huge problem. You caused it. You knew before you did this that it was a design decision that you made that made your cars much more susceptible to theft. And on cue, as is predictable, those cars have experienced much higher theft. Nobody but the manufacturer would have known about this. No consumer goes into the dealership thinking about this, and no insurance company would have known until they had the data and they started digging in about thefts. And now, because of the problems, the insurance industry has paid a lot of money because of Kia Hyundai's design decisions.
You mentioned Kia probably knowing about this, and that's kind of an interesting factor here. I mean, there were no recalls. They really didn't even make anybody aware of it until this huge TikTok trend went out there that they, late in the game recommended some sort of potential solution. Do you have any idea? I mean, I'd imagine that customers that were having their vehicles stolen were complaining to Kia and Hyundai, and they were, making them aware of this issue. I mean, we don't know at this point in time, but this wasn't some hidden issue. This was pretty widespread.
Well, I mean, important to say first off, I'm not sure what people were saying to Hyundai and Kia, but certainly by now they've got a duty to preserve information since there's so many lawsuits. So I expect that one of the focuses of discovery in the MDL is going to be what they knew and when they knew it and what they did about it. So those are things that I don't know a lot about. One other thing I would say though is that when you were saying these are known to everyone, I would say maybe just the opposite. Kia and Hyundai certainly knew, but I don't think consumers would know when they went in that these vehicles didn't have an immobilizer. There's no way for them to know that unless they take some investigative steps to try to figure that out or try to hotwire their own car. I don't even know what you would do when you're a well-off gentleman. When you go in to buy a vehicle, are you looking at like whether it has an immobilizer? It's not something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess that was the point. That Kia and Hyundai would have known of this before it was really out there in the public, assumptively, given the fact that they're going to have consumer complaints, and all of this is just speculation, of course. But it wasn't something that would have been hidden to them, I would imagine.
My working hypothesis is that they knew that selling vehicles without an immobilizer made them much more prone to theft. And I think that there's documentary evidence to support that hypothesis. But, at this point, I guess important as lawyers to say allegedly on everything that we say.
No, I mean, that's what we're just having to
discuss. The complaints against them certainly allege that they knew that their design decisions made their vehicles more likely to be stolen. And I don't have any trouble sort of digesting that. Like, yeah, you should know as a manufacturer, if you don't have an immobilizer on a car, it's going to make it more likely to be stolen, or at least easier to be stolen.
Absolutely. So if you're talking to a client today and they were asking you, what do we do now? I mean, what are you telling clients going forward that they should be doing to make sure that they preserve their rights to subrogate or do everything they can to maximize the likelihood of a future recovery?
Well, we have clients on all parts of the spectrum right now. We have clients who have identified all of the potential claims that they have going back to like 2011, and who've rounded them up, and we have data from all of them: VINs, dates of loss, location of loss, insured's name, amount of loss, all that sort of fundamental information. We have carriers that have given us all of that already. And then we have carriers who have called and been like, we think we have some of these, but we're not sure and we don't even know how to get our hands around the data. So I would say all data systems are different at insurance companies, but most can be searched. And I would be searching for at least things like Hyundai, Kia, theft. If you can do a Boolean search, which most carriers can do, combine those terms, see what you have, wrestle with it for a while. If you've identified any claims, reach out to us or whomever you work with or trust on the legal side of things and ask them that, to be involved. What we need if from our clients, if they want to be involved, and we encourage them to be involved as quickly as possible, what we need up front is the exact names of the underwriting entities, because all of these carriers write under so many different forms of paper. We need that. We need the principal place of business of each of those entities. And we need their Rule 7 disclosure information. In California, that means we need the names of any companies that didn't have losses, but that have a pecuniary interest in the losses. So if insurance company ABC is owned by insurance company XYZ, then we need the name of insurance company XYZ if it has a pecuniary interest. Probably best, though, just to reach out to you or me. That's pretty wonky.
Right. And could you, again, just for everyone, confirm the date range?
So the date range of the affected vehicles, safest to say, the best information right now is 2011 to 2021. Now, there's going to be potential statute of limitations issues, right? So we always encourage carriers, if they're in the data search stage of things, to start with the most recent thefts, because those are freshest and have the most viability, I think.
Absolutely. So now if somebody wants to get involved or they have questions, how did they get a hold of you?
They can call or write either of us. Our emails and phone numbers are on everything that we put out. If they were able to find this podcast, certainly they can find a way to find either you or I, for sure, right?
So at mwl-law.com. You can find all of our information, email addresses for both Rich and I, phone numbers, and both of us would be more than happy to talk about these claims. Aside from that, is there anything else, Rich, that you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I'm just thankful to be the very first guest of what is sure to be the fastest rising, hottest podcast in all of the iTunes library. I think it's cool that you're doing it, trying something new, and I'm pumped that you asked me to talk with you today. So good luck with
for the millions of subrogation interested people out there. This is going to be it's a new experience. And another thing I'll add to that is, if anybody's listening and you're in the industry and you have a topic, a concept, or you're even interested in participating, we'd love to have you. I'd love your ideas. So reach out to me. And without anything else, I appreciate your time. Thank you, Rich. It's been excellent. And signing off from here in beautiful Hartford, Wisconsin, this is the MWL Subrogation Support Network podcast. Thank you.